Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I would like to start with a brief history of this important cash crop. So we've been cultivating it for around 10,000 years, beginning in the Fertile Crescent. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution in the 1870s with the invention of the roller mill that there was increasing demand to feed the growing industrialized workforce, which basically caused the wheat to be selected to be more high-yielding. And another important development to note is during the 1910s, the industrialization of the Haber-Bosch process for producing fertilizer from atmospheric nitrogen, which greatly increased the population and, of course, food demand, which brings us to the Green Revolution, in which one important name to note is Norman Borlaug. He is credited with avoiding the starvation of nearly 1 billion people, for which he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. So how did he do it? He bred a high-yielding variety of wheat that was a dwarf version, meaning it could stand up under the weight of fertilizer, whereas previous varieties would just get knocked over. However, this variety was unable to outcompete weeds by itself, and so it was highly dependent on herbicides. It was also a genetic monoculture, so it was highly susceptible to diseases, and because of this, it had virtually no adaptive potential either, making it vulnerable to inconvenient things like climate change. With 95% of wheat grown belonging to a single variety, wheat is not in a good position to outsmart climate change. There are models that predict a 12% decline in wheat yields by the end of the century and more frequent breadbasket failures. And overall, the outlook is pretty bleak, especially considering that in the quest to maximize yield, we've completely overlooked the soil, choosing to focus instead on plant genetic traits. However, plant and soil health are deeply interconnected, and choosing to focus on one without the other has had dire consequences. For example, we've lost a lot of nutrients from our soil due to leaching, erosion, and off-gassing. A combination of nutrient loss and the degradation of soil organic matter, as well as soil biodiversity due to destructive soil management practices like tilling, fallowing, or removing crop residues have collectively contributed to an overall decline in soil fertility. And all of those things combined are leading to a loss of resilience due to being increasingly reliant on these external inputs, which are effectively making up for the loss of natural control mechanisms that would be inherent in a natural soil, in a healthy soil, such as associations with mycorrhizal fungi, which some of you may have heard of, that help plants get nutrients, but which decouple from their plant hosts under over-fertilized conditions. And additionally, we have climate change to worry about because many of these conventional agricultural practices are leading to increased emissions from the soil, compounding the direct threats from the management practices, and threatening the long-term sustainability of agriculture. So you could say that the previous generation's solutions have become this generation's problems to solve. But what I love about soil is that while it is a problem right now, it's also the solution, if you will. And that's because a healthy soil provides many ecosystem functions, such as water storage and filtration, carbon capture and storage. It harbors biodiversity, and it cycles nutrients, all of which help crops grow. So the good news is that we can harness the innate capacity of soil to serve as a carbon sink and this renewable source of both nutrients and genetic potential to work with nature rather than against it, to make our agriculture more resilient and benefit rather than harm nature at the same time. So I'm sure you're wondering how exactly we go about doing that, and the 4 soil health principles are a great place to start. So we can minimize disturbance to the soil. We can, there we go. We can maximize soil cover. We can maximize biodiversity, and we can also maximize the length of time that live roots are in the soil. Now, it so happens that my master's research is focused on how to achieve these principles in practice while enhancing the resilience of wheat to climate change. So, for example, we can grow perennial varieties of wheats, which minimizes disturbance and keeps the roots in the ground all year long. We didn't get the hang of it. We can grow cover crops alongside annual wheats, which keeps the soil covered and maximizes soil and plant biodiversity. So the take-home message is that we can really leverage multiple management practices to address many of the different challenges facing agriculture all at once. And while I'm at it, I just wanted to take a moment to plug the Soil Science Life. It's a thrilling one. I know many of you are interested in science, and I just want to encourage you to pursue that. You really do learn so much, whether it's approaching big problems, overcoming challenges, or learning to communicate your research to a wide variety of people. It can also take you places, literally, from the fields to the lab and many places in between. And if any of you aren't actually too sure you want to stick with science, I would also just say that it doesn't pigeonhole you, because really the core competencies you will learn are resilience, communication, and careful planning, and that will aid you no matter what field you choose. So with that being said, back to wheats. Well, what is the future of wheat? In my scientific opinion, future wheat varieties will have to be polycultures, meaning grown with other crops to maximize yield and minimize harmful inputs. They'll have to be perennial, which keeps the soil intact and the soil microbial communities thriving. It should be well adapted to the local diseases and climates, and they should also be self-sufficient, so free of the tyranny of these chemical inputs that harm soil health and are unsustainable to produce anyway. And before I end, I just want to acknowledge that while all of those changes are definitely needed, they alone will not be enough to change the current unsustainable paradigm in agriculture, and so for that we need deep systemic changes. For example, food being treated like a commodity is problematic for a few reasons, one of which it means farmers can't control prices, so they have to maximize the one thing that they can control, which is production, in order to hedge their bets against the chaos of the food market. And so that means that even if there are farmers that would love to implement ecological farming practices, most are currently unable to do so under the tyranny of the traders that are brokering prices and the insurance companies that will lower coverage if they don't see ever-increasing yields. So that's why government programs that subsidize costs, offer tax incentives, or otherwise take on some of the financial burden of transitioning to more ecological practices are absolutely crucial to reduce that pressure to constantly maximize the yield at the expense of the environment. And in the end, I believe climate change will force us to adapt one way or another, and when we see the political will materialize, I'm confident the solution will be right there waiting for us. Thank you.